It's 5 to 7. He looked to the heavens when he heard the engines hum. A sky full of planes and each one with a bomb. And they're gonna wanna drop them on someone. It's 5 to 7.
So today I'm joined by my friend from Wales, Ceri Thomas, who was over here in Guernsey a couple of months ago. And I thought it would be useful to have a chat with Ceri and see what he thought about a very occupation-themed visit that he had. Bit of a whirlwind tour around the island. Welcome, Ceri.
Thanks for having me.
Ah, you're welcome. So probably if we start with, what were your expectations when you first got on the ferry and you're on your way here? What were you expecting you were going to see?
After being to Jersey a couple of times, I had some sort of preconceptions of what life was like on the Channel Islands. I was interested to see what the differences were now, obviously, and what the different experiences were back then, and if they differed, significantly, or whether it was a very similar experience.
And how did you find that? Did you think there was quite a different experience or similar?
Well, I mean, I knew I was in for a bit of a ride when I got off the ferry and I was stopped by the border police, and they must have thought I was looking a bit dodgy. So I have to tell them what I was doing there. And I mentioned your name and they waved me through. So one of the border guys said, "Oh, say hello to Nick for me," and all that. He's a listener to the show. So if you're actually listening, hi.
And thanks for letting Ceri through.
Yeah.
Well, he was probably exhausted by the end of the weekend because we did manage to cram in quite a lot.
Yeah, it was whistle stop to the max.
And how did it compare to your visit to Jersey?
Well, for a start, I didn't have such a wonderful guide when I was in Jersey, so I had to, basically learn on the hop. And I was lucky enough. I went there several times, and one of the times was on one of the Liberation Days. I think it was 2015, so it would have been the 75th, is it? No, 70th. And so I got a flavour of how the occupation was, so much commemorated there then, and what they do in the way of education and restoring the bunkers, and and how they approach that from the Channel Islands Occupation Society. And I was lucky enough for a couple of the different visits that, obviously because they're not open daily, a lot of these things are, because they're all run by volunteers. I was lucky enough to get into a couple of them, and the restorations are fantastic. So it was interesting to see how that was carried out on Guernsey, and I wasn't disappointed in the slightest. I think the biggest thing I came to understand coming to Guernsey was how proximity is how it differed, the occupation. I mean, with Jersey's proximity to France meant that for the first part of the war, it was lightly defended. And then obviously, because Guernsey was out to sea, and how that changed then after D-Day. And, the stuff was sent to Jersey. So that was a learning curve for me. And it just went from there.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the important things that quite often gets missed is that we had the really big guns here because we were that bit 30 miles further out west into the sea, so handier for the shipping routes, protecting any U-boats coming back to the French coast and things like that. But as you quite rightly pointed out, some of the guns from the batteries here were then shipped to Jersey after D-Day.
And when I visited Jersey the first time, I think 2013, I went to Normand Point, where the guns ended up getting chucked off after the war. And it was nice to see that And I realised at the time that some had come from Guernsey, brought there, then dumped off the cliff, and then back to Guernsey. So it's nice to see one of them sort of coming home.
Yes, yeah, the one that's out at Plymouth Headland that's made its way back to Guernsey via being chucked off a cliff, as you say, which is a slightly circuitous route, and it was pretty difficult for them to recover it from the bottom of the cliff. I've never been down there, but it looks pretty difficult.
It's a bit tricky. It was just me and a rabbit, as I seem to remember rightly. But yeah, it was definitely worth the scramble.
Yeah, and they're still down there. I saw some drone footage the other day, actually, but they're just getting rustier and rustier, obviously.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was 75 years when I saw them, and it was even though they were rusty, you could still see the writing on the guns, the Waffen stamps and things like that. So considering, they've been subjected to the tide and the weather for the last 75 years, it was remarkable to be able to see that part of it.
I know one of the first things we did when you arrived was we went to the Occupation Museum, because that's only open in the mornings, well, till lunchtime anyway. What was your reaction to that?
I thought it was splendid. It was a fantastic museum. So many original artifacts, which, flesh out the story. And I think the biggest take one of the biggest things that from that weekend was the deportation of the non-Guernsey born citizens, which they have a table there with a model of the camp that they were sent to. And I might have known about it, but it really struck me at that point, and the sheer numbers of people that were moved off the island, and the petty reasons that they took them to Germany. And it's just one of those things where you realize that how stupid these people were, and stupid, petty and nasty. Let's just take non-born citizens, put them in a camp, and then use our dwindling resources to look after them. It's just a blind belief, Yeah, it was a big part of something I'd never, that is not well known.
Yeah, I think it does get overlooked, and particularly even if people do know about it, there tend to be things that they do overlook, such as that some of those people ended up in the early part of 1945 being given jobs like digging up Allied unexploded bombs near the camps to deal with them, which is just incredible that they ended up having to do that. Particularly as they shouldn't have been made to do that sort of thing. I know some people find it a little bit overwhelming at the museum, just because there is so much stuff to take in. I mean, we were there pretty much about 20 minutes, half an hour after it opened, and we left just before it closed at 1 o'clock. So I think we had plenty of time to look around there.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And like I said, the original stuff. You see a lot of reproduction signs and stuff, but to see all these original things from around the island, it was, it fleshes out the story. It makes it that more real, and when you see sort of firearms in a museum, they rarely have a story beyond, oh, this was carried by this type of troop or what have you, but to see a story attached to, this was so-and-so's gun, this was, presented to so-and-so, or this was hidden by so-and-so. Those are the little things, the details that bring the story to life,
Yeah, I think that is one thing that about that museum is there are a lot of personal stories that are contained therein, even down to we went into a replica of a cell that somebody had been put in, and that's just, and seeing the part of the uniform of one of the commandos that raided Guernsey, you knew exactly whose it was. I just think it's a great museum.
It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I couldn't recommend it more.
And Richard Yome, who runs it, he wasn't there the day we went, but Richard knows so much about the occupation. I think we did catch a fleeting glimpse of him as we were leaving. He was just coming up the road. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to speak to him. another place we went was the underground hospital, and I know Al Murray and James Holland went there when they came here on a visit. But I'd be interested just to see what you thought about that. You know, when you hear the name underground hospital, it doesn't sound that exciting, really, does it?
Well, again, it was the sheer size of it, with regardless of purpose. I mean, I'd been to the one in Jersey, so it was, and it's similar but different. You know, the different approaches to the way that these things are preserved, the exhibitions and things told their own stories, but also the empty space told its own story as well. You know, because a lot of it is, you know, how ultimately pointless it all was, you know, to the manpower and the time and effort and to make these things for very little, you know, for very little reason eventually. But no, very evocative. Just hearing your footsteps when you're walking about, and slightly eerie, but no, fantastic. Again, another must see part of the island. Again, you know, even for when you've got the aerial photographs in one of the caverns or one of the tunnels, you know, the ante rooms or whatever. Again, to be able to see the now and then photos, aerial photos, fantastic.
And keeping with an underground theme, we went in another tunnel as well. We went to the Valet Underground Museum, which is again a completely different experience on how you run a museum, how you just choose to display things. How did you feel about that one?
That was brilliant, very eclectic, and again, you just get caught up, and you're wandering along, and you spot this little thing that might, you know, that people will probably walk past, and suddenly it just catches your eye, and it's telling its own story, whether it's a newspaper on the wall or a map, or, you know, to see, I can't remember what that was, that map we were looking at. It was a map showing where the possible invasion points for the island were. And I couldn't remember whether it was an Allied one or a German one, was it? I couldn't remember.
It was an Allied one that they had on the wall, yeah. And I'd not seen that before. No, I'd not seen that before. That's clearly something they've got their hands on recently.
Yeah. And to see that, I mean, that one was built for, purposed for refueling U-boats, wasn't it? And to see one of the actual fuel tanks in there, which again had been repurposed. Again, it's the scale of these things. I know I hate the phrase mega structure, but you know, it doesn't have to be colossal to be impressive, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the smaller tunnels around the island, but as I mentioned, it's got an awful lot in it. It's worth going in just for the shop, actually.
Yeah.
The eclectic range of stuff that they have in the shop there.
Yeah, I bought an MG34 belt, I think it was.
Yes, that's right. I remember that.
Yeah. With some spent cases.
A bit of negotiating.
Yeah, and a lovely book, you know. Yeah, it was, again, the uniforms, and again, firearms which had stories to them, and a quite an interesting First World War section as well, which, you know, was well worth a look at as well. You know, it's to see the island wasn't just talking about the German occupation, but its participation of its citizens during the First World War as well, and the Second. But, you know, it might have been out of place in a different museum, but it was perfectly at home there, you know?
Yeah, and while we're talking about different eras, we went to Castle Corner as well.
Yeah. And again, Germans had sympathetically added to it. So the small bunkers, MG points and things like that, with the names on it. That was the one that struck me. Each had its own name.
Yeah, they all the air raid shelters and things like that. They all named them after women, so it was named after their wives and girlfriends, I believe.
I quite liked Frida.
I must confess, actually, one time during when it was particularly warm here, I did go and sit in one of those for about 10 minutes to cool off. Not that we had that problem when you were here, but
No, it was a bit windy.
and we also bumped into Charlie Roberts, one of the avid listeners to the podcast, who was doing some tour guiding there as well. So we got a bit of a bonus because we heard some of his tour as we were wandering around.
Yeah, which is very good.
But yeah, again, yes, yeah, indeed. and of course, there's other things in there like the 201 Squadron Museum and things like that as well.
Yeah, well, we got to go back because I missed the First World War part of that as well. So
yes,
it's just too much to do. Too much to do.
Indeed, despite the fact we did it all at relatively high speed.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other places we went to, which was the OB Tower, MP3, that was another fantastic spot. And each level, I can't remember if I'd been in one before. I can't remember if I'd been in one in Jersey, but no, it was really good. Really, really good.
Yeah, and there was no stopping you even up to the roof.
No, definitely. Best view in the house.
I've been up that ladder before, and it's I think my days of climbing up that are definitely long gone. But there was no stopping you.
No, there never is.
There is a cracking view from up there. So if anybody listening,
it was fantastic. Yeah,
does come to Guernsey, then it's well worth a visit.
Yeah, I think the toddler in me for climbing is yet to be stopped by old age.
Indeed. And so I know you said about, you were interested in the differences between the islands and differences between your previous visits and now. Did it leave you with any, did it answer your questions, or did you end up with a lot more questions compared to?
Always more questions. Every time you get this little snippet, it all adds up, and I think it's there's some things that you can learn, and then like I said, with the deportation, it just changes, it just turns things on its head, and suddenly you're looking at a different story again, and it's different. But the thing is, because I learned more about what happened in Guernsey on that weekend than I did in the several trips to Jersey, because it was basically, a bit more than tourism, but it was a holiday, in when I was going to Jersey with added bunkers. So it was, apart from, and like I said, their underground hospital is probably the best place to go for an overview of the occupation there, if you're going there on holiday, because it tells a story, and as you walk in through different galleries, you get a different experience. It's part of the hospital and part of this, and also the one of the really great things about there was the ticket you get as admission is like a facsimile of a civilian ID card, and you get different ones for different people and whatnot. And then when you're walking around, at some point during that walk, you'll find out what happened to the person who's on your card. They might have made it to the end of the war, or they might have ended up in a concentration camp or something like that. So, even the ticket. So that as far, if anybody was ever going to Jersey, I would direct them there, because that was a thing. Guernsey, like I said, you couldn't fault the Occupation Museum that you start there, because again, that makes you want to know more. Where is this? How did that happen? Why was these people sent? And suddenly it's a whole new avenue of questions again.
Yeah. And one of the other places we went was the Naval Signals bunker. And I think that probably raised a few questions from your point of view as well.
Definitely. I mean, when we were going in for finding out that it was above ground, because, I mean, if you look at it now, it looks like it's like sort of semi-subterranean, but to realise that back then it was above ground. But I don't think I've ever seen a place as thoroughly restored as that. I just remember seeing so many bunkers in Normandy you go to, even the restored ones, nothing has got a patch on that. You know, the gas seals around the doors, the genuine writing that's been restored is unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable, unmissable. It's one of those fantastic places. Very enthusiastic guide there, who is just a font of knowledge. So, you know, he seems to know pretty much everything you could about it. I mean, but there was that little story about the pistol, which I don't know if you've told. I don't think you've told it on the story yet, but about the commandant's pistol, which he stashed, that was subsequently found many years later.
Willie Hagedorn, yes, which his pistol was found many years later because he'd put it behind a grill. But when he came back in the 70s and 80s to look for it, he couldn't locate it. But they did subsequently find it, and he was very involved in giving them advice on what it looked like.
And it shows. I mean, it's such an immersive place. The only thing I would add to that place would be speakers with some sort of like background noise of typewriters and stuff like that. And then you'd be there, you know. It's phenomenal. Yeah. And it's, like I said, it's with the ones in Normandy, they're either battle damaged and stuff like that. But to see these things, you know, in as they were, it's remarkable.
Yeah, and it's taken them years to get it back like that, but and it's often overlooked, as we discovered with one of our friends, Alistair, who lives literally 2 minutes walk away from there, and had never been. So it was worth it because we took him along as well.
Yeah, no, definitely another must see place.
So what would you recommend people? Is that the must go and see if they only have a short period of time here? What would be your favourite thing to see?
Oh, the Occupation Museum, definitely, and the Naval Signals HQ. Those two definitely, and then the tunnels, and then basically you just drive along the coast and see a bunker every couple hundred yards. I mean, another place that we went to, Fort Homet, because we were in Vaison Bay, and you would tell me about the civilian escapes from there. And, you know, thinking, wow, that must be tricky, especially seeing that there was a minefield just behind them when they were trying to get away. But it wasn't until on the Monday, then just before I left, that we went and got into the Homet that you could see how exposed that bay was. From a German position, you're thinking how they must have had balls of steel, you know, to even contemplate doing it. You've got a minefield on one side and a heavily defended German position overlooking you with searchlights and everything. That takes some doing. That's incredible.
I mean, that was one of the spots the Germans were convinced was going to be used if they tried to if the British tried to retake the islands. So that's probably one of the reasons why it's got quite so much in the way of bunkers.
Yeah, it was a nice day when we went there as well. So, you know, it looked very picturesque. It was difficult to sort of think of it covered in barbed wire and mines, and, you know, to have that oppressive atmosphere. But when you saw it from the top, then it sort of really brought it home then that how brave these people were to try and even attempt escaping from that place, you know, for that particular Vaison Bay.
Yeah, we'll have to take you to some more of the sites when you next come back to visit, and perhaps do a little bit more around some of the sort of key locations that are still there but were used by the Germans, such as the Feldkommandantur and things like that, which we can definitely take in, albeit they're not museums; they are still used.
No. I mean, we had that great afternoon at the Battery Scharnhorst, and we had a good look around that. And another thing that I learned there, I've been to plenty of these batteries in Normandy, was the holes in the concrete base of these gun emplacements, which were set for demolition charges, which are basically just naval shells wired up. And that's just like asking for trouble, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm,
know.
I'm not too sure about the whole logic of wiring that kind of thing. If I knew that was there and I was in charge of firing the gun, I'd be a bit worried that it might end up as collateral damage.
Well, without a doubt. And the first sight of an Allied plane, I'd be in. Well, I couldn't take to the hills, but I'd take to the coast. That's for sure.
Yeah, that was a great tour actually with Amanda from
Yes.
Tours of Guernsey.
No, it was fantastic.
Yeah, no, her tours are always worth going on, and we'll probably try and catch a couple of her tours when you're next over. Maybe go down
definitely good.
the Myris Battery and things like that, which I'm sure you would enjoy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm going to try and make it for Liberation Day next year, because it's going to be a big one, isn't it? So
Yeah, the 80th. Yeah, so
yeah. So I'm going to try my damnedest to get over for that.
that'll be excellent. Ceri, thanks so much for your time. We had a few technical problems, so thank you for putting up with those. We've eventually, hopefully, got the tech to work okay. It sounds all right at the moment. So thank you so much again, and look forward to seeing you back in Guernsey.
Fantastic. Cheers, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
He looked to the heavens when he heard the engines hum. A sky full of planes and each one with a bomb.